guys. For this unit, we're going to take a little bit of a break from some of the heavy stuff, and I'm going to talk to you about how to deal with acronyms when you're writing research-based papers or APA-style papers in general. Often when you're working on a research paper, or sometimes if you're just introducing a term or a disease with a lengthy name or something like that in your writing, it's helpful to shorten it so that your reader doesn't have to read a big long term again and again. So let's look at how we do this in APA style. All right, I've chosen information from a couple of articles. I have some from the CDC right here. I have one from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, some organizations that you've probably heard of. If we were going to borrow information from these articles, it might look like this. So let's say we want to talk about this e-cigarette or vaping product use associated lung injury. That's a mouthful, isn't it? I don't want to type that out again and again. And the CDC has already helpfully shortened this for me to EVALI. Notice that after they have spelled out what the condition is, then they place this acronym right behind it in parentheses. This is how you would handle it in your own paper, and I'll show you an example of that here in a minute. Right now, I'm not actually interested in EVALI. I'm interested in how we deal with introducing the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Clearly, you know that we tend to refer to this organization as the CDC. So how do we get from this to CDC? Well, in this case, we're using a parenthetical citation, right? The information here is already inside parentheses. So all we have to do is put in a square bracket. You'll find this to the right of the P on your keyboard. You're going to put in CDC, which is the recognized acronym for this organization. That's all you're going to do. The next time CDC appears in your paper, let's say you have another parenthetical citation, you're only going to use the abbreviation CDC. No square brackets, nothing special or fancy, just this. If you refer to them outside of parentheses, you're going to do the same thing. For instance, like the CDC recommends, well, actually, we're citing in the same paragraph, so we don't need the date again. The CDC recommends everybody give up vaping right away. Okay, again, no square brackets. We're not spelling out Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, nothing. Okay, once we've introduced this acronym, we never use the full name of the organization again. So the very first time you introduce the organization, introduce the acronym, never use the full name again until you reach your references page. You should never use the abbreviation for an organization on the references page. You should use its full and proper name. Okay, so your paper, you're going to have this CDC, CDC, CDC. On the references page, we're going to have Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and remove this reference. Let's say instead of the first mention of CDC being inside parentheses, let's say you elected to give us a narrative citation. And let's say also that you have already somewhere else in the paper introduced EVALI. Okay, so let's say this is the first mention of the CDC we see in your paper. Okay, looks like this. How do we do this? Well, before the date, okay, but still right after the first mention of that organization, we're going to say CDC. And then if the date immediately follows it, we're going to have ND. In this case, we have ND because there was no publication date on the article. Otherwise, if we had a date, it would appear right here. Okay, so immediately after the organization name, the acronym appears. Thereafter, goodness. Okay, thereafter, we're going to use CDC until we get to the references page. Let's look at another example. So So another one of those articles was from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So let's say we're looking at this quote. We're talking about grizzly bears, how their color ranges from blonde to deep brown to black. This is thought to be because of their diet and the temperature in the places they inhabit. Interesting. I never knew that before. Presented this way, we would use a parenthetical citation, right? All the information appears in parentheses at the end. So, same deal. Because we're already inside parentheses, we're going to use a square bracket, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, square bracket. Thereafter, if we mention them again, it doesn't matter if it's inside parentheses or out, USFWS, every time, until we get to the references page. If we're introducing, and I just used the same quote here, okay? If we elect to use a narrative citation, right? The author and the year come first, and then the additional information comes down here in parentheses. So the author and the year come first. So right here, we're going to place our acronym, and then thereafter, throughout the rest of the paper, until we get to the references page, we're only going to use USFWS. It's already been defined for the reader. If they forget, they can flip back to earlier in the paper to find where this acronym was first defined. Okay? That's how we deal with organizations. So how do we deal with terms? Well, you saw that in the evaluate example up above, but let's take a look at a slightly more complicated paragraph. You know that you probably shouldn't repeat yourself a whole lot, but sometimes you have to repeat yourself when you're using a particular term because that term is what the essay is all about. So here we're talking about healthcare workers wearing cloth masks versus surgical masks in a hospital setting. So here we have healthcare workers, we have healthcare workers again, we have healthcare workers again, right? It keeps popping up, and it pops up all throughout McIntyre's article. So what McIntyre did, and what I would do then as the author, is to use the abbreviation HCW, okay, for healthcare workers. So here, excuse me, it was HCWs because it's plural. So here, instead of healthcare workers, it would be HCWs. Also here, HCWs. Now, you shouldn't just do this willy-nilly in your paper, okay? If you have a term that you're using, only do this if the research you're reading has done it as well. But the important thing to remember is that when you are dealing with such a term, something that has an abbreviation, hopefully a recognized abbreviation, right? One that you've seen before, present the term in its entirety. Right behind it, in parentheses, give the abbreviation. And then, again, for the rest of the paper, the only thing we're ever going to see again is the abbreviation. Do not alternate between the full term and the abbreviation throughout your paper, okay? You're probably not going to have to use this for a couple of weeks, but write it down, put it in your notes, and or use this video as a reference if you are dealing with sources or organizations that require acronyms as you are working on your paper.